Okay, some people have been asking me how I built my arcade machine, so this will just be a quick video to go over how I did that for them. And maybe some others will come across this video as they're building their machines. Maybe it'll help them out to see how I did things, or at least give them some ideas. I built a showcase style cabinet. I personally prefer the looks of these to traditional cabinets, especially for 4-player setups. Gives you a little bit more room. It just feels better to me, but again, it's personal preference. I built this out of particle board and plywood. There are two big regrets I have. The first is using particle board. It's just what I had on hand, so I used it, but it was a lot of sanding and filling. It would have been much easier and looked better if I'd just used a smooth plywood or even MDF. There are still some imperfections that bug me. So I may end up doing it again and doing it better. The other thing I regret is not having a CNC shop cut my plexi for me. It's okay, there are just some minor imperfections and it doesn't line up perfectly. I recommend, if you have a few extra bucks, to have a shop do it for you. It just looks nicer and will line up perfectly. Let's see, I also I have a screen shield I haven't put up on the front. I haven't mounted the TV yet either, but I'll do that eventually. Up there is my marquee. I had a CNC shop do that one, and I put an RGB strip in there, powered through the TV, USB. Here's the control panel. It's 4-player. For players 1 and 2, I did 7 buttons. There are some Neo Geo games and some other emulators where you just need a few more buttons. So 1 and 2 have 7, and then 3 and 4 have 4 buttons. And of course they're angled, so it's more comfortable for players 3 and 4. A lot of people will put them straight north and south, and that's not how you're supposed to do it, is what I've been told. But it does feel better this way. Each player has a coin and a start. I do have admin buttons. Some people don't like admin buttons. I like them. They give you some flexibility. I may change what they do at some point once I get a better feel for exactly what emulators and what games I want to play. And then I have a spinner for games that require a spinner. I use Ultimark U360 joysticks. It's probably overkill to have 4 of them, but since players 3 and 4 probably won't ever use them, but I want them to look the same, and I just decided to get 4 of them. If we look under, and then for my graphics, I did this myself. Nothing special, just transition from Asteroids into Mrs. Pac-Man into Donkey Kong, and then the name of the machine and some Space Invaders along the bottom. If we look underneath here, here's a shot of underneath. I'll just do a quick overview of how I wired it, and maybe there are some people out there who aren't quite sure how to wire it up. So I pulled this out so you can see each of the buttons has a couple different things. This is the switch right here. This top contact is normally closed, the middle one is normally open, and this top one here, or bottom one, is the ground. So you want to connect your button wire to the normally open, so that when you push the button down, it closes and activates the button. Each of these has a ground, so the ground wire is actually one that you can daisy chain together and run all your ground wires from your buttons off of one wire. So you can see this one goes up to this one, and then it loops down to this one, and then to this one, and it goes to all your buttons, and then you can just run one wire. You can see the red one here that goes down to your control board, to the ground. All the other buttons have a single wire from the normally open contact here. Then also, each button I did RGB LEDs, so there's a ground for each LED. Those do have to go down to their own pin. And then there's a red, green, blue RGB wires. So 4 wires for each LED, which is a lot of wires. And then they go down, if we follow the RGB, these colored ones here, they go down to my PAC 64 LED controller. This is just powered through a Molex off of your power supply, and then a USB connection to interface with your system. But you can see each connector has a ground and then 3 pins for the RGB. It's pretty simple. Then if you follow these wires, each button has a single wire coming down, and then that ground wire we talked about. These go down to my UHID. You can get different types of controllers. I got the UHID. There's an iPAC 64 that you can also use, and some other interfaces. But basically every wire goes down to a pin, and then the big red ones are my grounds. Each button cluster, so each player has their own ground wire. You could probably do them all together. I don't know, I just did a separate ground wire for each cluster of buttons. That's powered through USB 2. And then here's the little interface for the spinner. And that's just USB. All of my wires are just run down through here. Here's the U360. It's pretty simple too. It's just a USB. You can actually use these pins too for buttons if you want to. I had enough pins on my UHID that I didn't need to use this. But these do the same thing as the pins on the UHID, which is pretty nice if you don't want to buy a separate controller. I was worried I wasn't going to have enough with all my RGBs, so I bought the UHID. And then my PC, so those run down through back to my PC. There's my speakers, subwoofer, and then it's a really modest build. It's no frills, just something that can run everything up to PS1. You can see I have a couple USB ports, or USB hubs, my power strip, and then my guns. I need to do something better to hold the wire that goes through, but for now I just wanted to get it up and running. I'll eventually do a plug on the outside of the case, so I don't need to reach in here and turn it on, or just leave it on. We can look at, last thing, I have some of the softwares I've used up here to configure my system. So Lightspeed Mamelister is really nice because you can actually it'll filter and export your game list for you. So if you don't want, all the casino games and all of the matching games, things that you don't want, it's really easy to go in here and select categories of things that you just don't want to have on your machine. It makes it really nice instead of having to go through thousands of games to try and get only the ones that you want. So that's a nice tool. This is the PAC 64 utility that you use for your LEDs. You can set IDs, you can change the brightness, you can do a few different things with this utility. This one behind here is for my Ultra Sticks. You can change, like I said, they're fully analog, but if if you're playing Pac-Man, you can change it to a 4-way and actually have a little bit better feel for the 4-way games. I'll probably just leave them analog. I forgot to mention, you can buy physical restrictors for these. So if you're playing Pac-Man and you only have 4 directions to go, you can have a physical restrictor in there, so you can actually even pull it this way. And it feels just a little bit better for those games. Like I said, for now I'll probably just leave it. Maybe eventually I'll do a dedicated machine for 4-way games. So that's the utility for that. You make sure that if you have multiple Ultra Sticks, you change your device IDs. I had problems because I didn't set my IDs to separate IDs, and I spent way too much time trying to figure that out. Same with the guns. This is the aim track guns utility. You need to give them separate IDs, but you can come in here and calibrate it and assign the buttons on the gun to whatever you want. This is the UHID utility, so you can just see all your pins here, and you can click on any one of them and go over here and set what it does. So if you want, a key press or a button press to simulate pressing the B button on your keyboard, you can do that, and then configure the same in your emulator so it does what you want. And then I haven't set up my LED blinky yet. Eventually I'll make it so only the buttons that you use in the game light up so that people aren't pressing the wrong buttons. I need to go in and set that up. That'll be the next thing I do. I use Launchbox and Big Box. It's a really slick front end. And then I use eMovie Sync. I have a subscription to that gives you all the movies and box art and music, so you don't need to go try and find those yourself. But this is a really slick front end. It's easy to configure. It looks nice. I only have a few systems in here. I have arcade, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo. But you can put any emulator in here that you want. Yeah, so you can go in here and flip through all the arcade games. It actually has an attract mode too, where you can it'll basically flip between games and just kind of show you all of them when you're not using it. So that's kind of it. That's my arcade. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I'll do it better next time. I'll put in the description some of the places I use, some of the places I got my parts. Let me know if you have any questions.